Howdy folks, Spencer here, and today I'll be breaking down the brand new Partners in Crime Lockbox. As always, chapters to each topic are listed down below. This lockbox is live on PC as of today, January 28th, and will likely be arriving over on console sometime in early March. This lockbox features items from Discovery Season 5, with the box itself being named after Maul and Mock, and many of the items, of course, having a Breen theme. Moving into the box contents, the grand prize is the Tier 6 Breen Cath Star Intel Courier, and I'll be going over the full stats of this here in a few minutes after I go over the rest of the box contents. Next up is the Krenim Chronophage Universal Console. Passives on this are 10% cooldown reduction for science and temporal abilities. The clicky launches the Krenim Chronophage at your foe, which will inflict the following effects to the targeted foe and up to 10 other foes within 3 kilometers of that foe each second for up to 20 seconds. Some physical damage every second, which based on preliminary testing seems to be doing a good bit, along with the hold and shield offline effect for 2 seconds, which is able to keep reapplying to foes for the entire 20-second duration. And then the primary foe, the one that you hit the console on, is going to be randomly teleported every 5 seconds to another nearby random foe, which is then spreading those debuffs and the damage to those additional foes. So based on what I've seen so far from folks in Discord, the damage this console does is pretty good. Mara slapped this onto one of her Complex Plasma Fire CSV setups, and as you can see there, 116k on a run that was 1.6 million, so for a universal console, especially one that's going to be pretty cheap to obtain on the exchange, that's pretty good, and I imagine this is going to be a really good console for science EPG builds as well. And heading over to the kit modules, we have 2 new ones. Unfortunately, these are immediately binding to character upon winning them from the lockbox, so there's no supply on the market. Now, here's the picture for the Vermilion Assault Drones. Now, let me pull up the tooltips for you guys. So for the Vermilion Assault Drones, this is going to summon in 3 of these Assault Drones for 30 seconds, which will periodically charge into the enemy and then explode after a short delay. And for the Micro Singularity Generator, this summons a Micro Singularity Disruption, which will pull foes within 25 feet before quickly dissipating after 2 seconds. It then leaves behind a Gravitational Breach for 10 seconds, which deals physical damage to foes and debuffs run speed within a 15-foot radius. As for how good or bad these are, community testing is still ongoing, but the fact that they are immediately bound to you upon winning them from a box means that not everyone has had an opportunity to fully test them yet. And heading into the personal ground and space traits, there's a total of 3 for ground, 3 for space. So for ground, the first here is Glass Cannon. You're going to trade off 16.7% max shield capacity for 20% Cat 1 all weapon damage. And then there is Resonating Personal Shields. This is going to give you shield hardness and regeneration, scaling with nearby allies. So per player or allied NPC of Lieutenant rank or higher within 150 feet, 2% of max shields restored every 2 seconds, plus 2% shield resilience. And then there is Scent of Blood. Your secondary weapon firing mode recharges faster after landing a critical hit on your target, may occur once every 2 seconds. So every 2 seconds, when you get a critical hit, you can reduce the recharge time on your secondary fire by 2 seconds. So I think these traits are pretty interesting. I think Scent of Blood is going to be really appealing to those of you that really like the secondary fire on your ground weapons. And Glass Cannon, for anyone that is still using weapons as their primary damage source for ground, that is going to be a really interesting trait for you. And heading over to the space traits, the first is Red Directive. This is 15% recharge time for Intel and Temporal Bridge Officer abilities. Given how much cooldown reduction we have out there that impacts everything, I don't think I would bother with something that is only impacting a couple of abilities on your build. Next up is Harmonic Shield Linkage. Per player or allied NPC of cruiser rank or higher within 10 kilometers, 2% of max shields restored every 2 seconds, and 2% shield resistance. Now, for the carrier players here, your pets are not going to be high enough rank for you to benefit from them with this trait, so you're probably going to be limited to about a 10% buff from this in most team situations. And the final personal space trait is Breen Shield Tunneling. This is going to give you 30% shield and armor pen for your weapons in exchange for losing 9.1% of your max shield capacity. That is crazy, crazy good. 30% shield and armor pen is just a crazy number for a personal space trait. That is giving you the same amount of debuff that Superior Area Denial would give, but it's also giving you shield pen. This is a trait that every single energy weapon space build is going to be using moving forward, and even torpedoes. Like, this is just, if you use weapons on your ship, which is pretty much everyone, and if they are your primary damage source, you should be running this trait. This is a must-slot meta trait moving forward. It is crazy how good that is. Next up, for the weapon pack, there is, of course, your full set of ground and space weapons here, beams and cannons for space, and for ground, you've got a split beam, high density beam rifle, rapid sweep rifle, compression bolt pistol, stun pistol, and wide beam pistol. Here's some pictures of them on the blog, and I'll have this link down below if you want to take a closer look at the pictures. As for the space weapons, being Breen, these are of course Polaron. The proc on these is a 2.5% chance to deal cold damage equal to 1% of the target's max hull capacity. And per discussion in the builds Discord, it appears that the proc is unable to trigger on Dreadnought or capital ships, which sorta sucks. Overall, for someone looking for some good Polaron weapons, these will do fine. We're able to get a bit more from the 2.5% procs nowadays with all the haste we have access to. Mara's already tested a full set of these and was able to get 30k DPS from the proc on a 1.3 mil run, which is fine and does push these above the Polaron competition, but isn't good enough to displace Plasma, Phaser, or Disruptors out of the higher end meta. Basically, these are good budget weapons, but at the high end, if you already have, really good Phaser, Disruptor, or Plasma set, keep using those. The Starship trait listed on the blog, never there, is the trait from the Breen Keth Sar Intel Courier, so they just accidentally left it in here. And then we have some new costumes in the Lobi store. There is the Breen Renegade and the Courier Renegade. These have a base cost of 200 Lobi, but with the 20% sale we have right now, are 160 Lobi per. And also in the Lobi store is two new ground weapons, the Breen 3191 Polaron Rifle Staff and the Courier Stasis Pistol. Now, I don't know how these are performing quite yet. That testing has not been done yet, but these do have a base cost of 200 Lobi, or 160 with the current sale. So they are substantially more expensive than many of the other ground weapons in the Lobi store. And heading over to the stats for the Breen ship, it has a hull modifier of 0.9, a shield mod of 0.85, a 5-2 weapon setup, 2 device slots. We'll go over the bridge officers in a moment. For the consoles, 5 tac, 4 inch, 2 psi, base turn rate of 22.5, impulse mod of 0.215, inertia of 85, so it is a very, very high maneuverability ship. Plus 15 to weapons and aux power. It has an experimental weapon, and being an intel ship, it does of course have access to the gather intel mechanic. Now for the bridge officer setup, the blog says 2 times Commander Universal with intel. Only one of those commanders has intel, the other has no specialization. Then this has a Lieutenant Commander Universal with pilot and an Ensign Universal. So that is a total of 12 bridge officer abilities, one less than you would see on other T6 ships. And comparison-wise, the Breen Keth is basically just the reverse of the Lost Serena when it comes to the bridge officer setup, and it is fully universal. So the Lost Serena had a Commander TAC with pilot, and then a Lieutenant Commander Universal with intel. On the Breen Keth, it's a Lieutenant Commander pilot, and then a Commander Universal with the intel. Weapons-wise, the Breen Keth does have an extra aft weapon. The Lost Serena only had one aft. The difference is the Lost Serena then gets that 13th bridge officer ability. And console-wise, again, very similar. They both have 5 TAC consoles, and it's just that they have flipped the engineering and science console slots around. And feature-wise, the Breen Keth doesn't list it in the blog, but it does have Raider flanking, and it does have an innate battle cloak built into it, so it does suck losing that bridge officer ability versus the Lost Serena, but I think that this is a very nice alternative to the Lost Serena if you're looking to get that extra aft weapon and that innate battle cloak. For the Admiralty card, this is 42 inch, 56 tac, 28 psi, and the special is plus 35 tac when alone. And next up is the experimental weapon, Bunker Buster. This fires experimental Polaron charges, which will automatically seek out the nearest foe within a 10-kilometer radius and rush towards them. Once close enough to their foe, they detonate, dealing heavy Polaron damage within a 5-kilometer area and reducing the defense of foes in that area. It does say that this is a charge-based experimental, and that you may only have 6 of these charges out in play at once, and you'll be unable to fire additional shots until the existing ones have been delivered or have timed out after 60 seconds. Performance-wise, this thing is not currently scaling correctly, so I can't give you final numbers for it until they have fixed it, but I do not expect that this will come anywhere close to what the hexacannons are capable of doing. And for the console, this is Aggressive Negotiations. The passives are plus 20 Starship Weapon Accuracy and 15.2 Starship Damage Control. For the clicky, for the first 10 seconds of it being active, you're going to get plus 20% damage, Cap 1, 25% accuracy, 150% flight speed, and then after that 10 seconds, it is then going to apply a second buff for 10 seconds, which is cloaking you. And during that time, you are unable to fire your weapons. After that, you're then going to get a 100% tac skill buff for 30 seconds. So the fact that this cloaks you and takes you out of combat for 10 seconds is not something I'm a big fan of, and even if you have this ship, I probably would not run this console because to me, cloaking and then losing the ability to fire weapons for 10 seconds is a very huge negative. And the Starship trait is never there. Whenever you activate attack or intel bridge officer ability, you summon 6 probes which will distract enemies. Each probe creates a 2.5 kilometer sphere, in which it taunts foes, applies a 50% movement debuff, and lowers their accuracy by 20%. Now, I don't know how good this trait is yet, I haven't had an opportunity to test it, but if you're looking for something that could draw threat off of you, on paper, this looks pretty interesting. To summarize everything, by far the most important additions here are the new personal ground and space traits, especially Breen shield tunneling for space. Now, I'll be testing the ship out a bit over the next few days, and once I get over this fun strep fiasco I'm currently dealing with, I'll likely do another video on it. And that's going to be it for today. Again, my apologies for any poor audio quality here from me being sick. As always, thank you to all channel members and viewers for the continued support. See you guys around.